Exfoliation has become one of the most enthusiastically recommended steps in modern skincare culture. Scroll through any skincare account on social media, read through any beginner skincare guide, and you'll almost certainly encounter some version of the same advice. Exfoliate regularly for glowing, smooth, clear skin. The logic sounds straightforward. Removing dead skin cells from the surface reveals fresher skin underneath, prevents clogged pores, and allows other skincare products to penetrate more effectively. And all of that is true to a point. The part that rarely gets mentioned with the same enthusiasm is what happens when exfoliation goes from being a helpful step in a skincare routine to something done so frequently that it starts working directly against the skin's own natural function. The reality is that overexfoliation is one of the most common causes of skin problems that dermatologists see in people who are actively trying to improve their skin. People who develop increased sensitivity, unexpected breakouts, persistent redness, or skin that feels perpetually tight and uncomfortable after doing everything right. By the standards of popular skincare advice, these are frequently people who have been exfoliating too often without realizing it. Understanding why this happens requires understanding what the skin barrier actually is and what it does, because the entire problem of overexfoliation is fundamentally a story about disrupting a biological system that the body depends on for basic protection. The skin barrier refers specifically to the outermost layer of skin called the stratum corneum. This layer is composed of flattened, dead skin cells arranged in a structure that researchers often compare to bricks in a wall, with the cells themselves acting as the bricks and a mixture of lipids including ceramides, fatty acids, and cholesterol filling the spaces between them like mortar. This structure is not just an inert outer coating, it serves several critical functions simultaneously. It prevents excessive water loss from the deeper layers of skin, keeping skin hydrated from the inside out. It acts as a physical barrier against environmental irritants, pollutants, and allergens that would otherwise come into direct contact with living skin cells, and it maintains a slightly acidic environment on the skin's surface, known as the acid mantle, that helps regulate the skin's natural microbiome and limits the overgrowth of harmful bacteria. When this barrier is intact and functioning well, skin tends to feel comfortable, look balanced, and respond predictably to products. When this barrier is disrupted, which is exactly what overexfoliation does, the consequences show up across all of these functions simultaneously. Water evaporates more easily from the skin, leading to dehydration and tightness. Irritants that would normally be blocked penetrate more easily, causing increased sensitivity and redness. The disrupted acid mantle can allow certain bacteria to proliferate more easily, sometimes leading to breakouts in people who weren't previously prone to them. The skin essentially becomes less able to protect itself at exactly the moment it most needs that protection to recover. Exfoliation works by accelerating the removal of cells from the outer layer of the stratum corneum, either physically through scrubbing or mechanically, or chemically through acids that dissolve the bonds holding dead cells together. Done at an appropriate frequency, this removal of surface cells can genuinely improve skin texture and tone, support clearer pores, and help certain active ingredients reach deeper skin layers more effectively. The skin has a natural cell turnover cycle, and supporting that cycle with occasional exfoliation can be beneficial. The problem arises when exfoliation is done so frequently that it removes cells faster than the skin can replace them and repair the lipid matrix that gives the barrier its protective function. Daily exfoliation for most people is simply too frequent for the skin barrier to maintain its integrity. The skin's natural cell turnover cycle takes approximately 28 days in younger adults, slowing somewhat with age, which means the skin is already continuously renewing itself without any external help. Exfoliating daily interferes with this natural process by stripping away cells and disrupting the lipid layer faster than the body's repair mechanisms can compensate. Some people notice the consequences quickly within days of starting daily exfoliation. Others have skin resilient enough to tolerate it for weeks before the cumulative damage to the barrier becomes noticeable. But for the vast majority of people, daily exfoliation eventually leads to a compromised barrier, regardless of how well the skin seemed to tolerate it initially. One reason this problem is so common despite being well documented in dermatology is that the early signs of overexfoliation are easy to misinterpret. When someone's skin starts feeling tight, looking slightly shiny in an almost waxy way, or becoming more sensitive than usual, the instinctive response is often to add more products. To address these symptoms, a heavier moisturizer for the tightness, more targeted treatments for the breakouts, more exfoliation to address what feels like congested or rough texture. This response often makes the underlying problem worse because the skin barrier that needs to repair itself is being further disrupted by additional products and continued exfoliation rather than being given the conditions it needs to recover. There's also the issue of how easily people accumulate exfoliation without realizing it. Exfoliation doesn't only come from dedicated exfoliating products like scrubs, toners, or exfoliating masks. Many common skincare ingredients have exfoliating properties as a secondary effect, including retinoids, vitamin C in higher concentrations, and some niacinamide formulations. Someone might be using a retinoid serum, a vitamin C serum, an exfoliating toner, and a cleanser with a mild acid, none of which individually seem excessive, but together represent a significant cumulative exfoliating load on the skin when you add a dedicated daily physical or chemical exfoliant on top of that existing product combination. The total amount of exfoliating action happening on the skin can be dramatically higher than any single product label would suggest. Physical exfoliation and chemical exfoliation also carry somewhat different risk profiles, though both can cause barrier damage when overdone. Physical exfoliant scrubs, brushes, cleansing devices remove cells through mechanical friction. When used too aggressively or too frequently, physical exfoliants can cause microtears in the skin surface, disrupt the lipid layer unevenly, and cause localized inflammation. The abrasiveness of a physical exfoliant can also feel deceptively satisfying in the short term, giving skin a temporarily smooth feel that can encourage more frequent use than is actually beneficial. Chemical exfoliants, primarily alpha-hydroxy acids, like glycolic and lactic acid, and beta-hydroxy acids like salicylic acid, work by dissolving the bonds between dead skin cells, allowing them to shed more easily. Chemical exfoliants are generally considered more controllable than physical ones because the concentration and pH of the product can be precisely formulated, but they can still cause significant barrier disruption when used too frequently, into high concentration, or in combination with other actives that increase skin sensitivity. The signs of a compromised skin barrier from overexfoliation tend to develop gradually and can look quite different from person to person. Persistent tightness or a sensation of skin feeling stretched, particularly after cleansing, is one of the most common early indicators. Increased sensitivity to products that previously caused no reaction, including moisturizers or gentle cleansers, suggests that the barrier is no longer filtering out potential irritants effectively. Skin that looks shiny or almost plastic-like in texture, rather than naturally dewy, can indicate that the outer layer has been thinned significantly. Redness, either diffuse across the face or concentrated in patches, reflects an inflammatory response from a barrier that's no longer able to keep irritants out. Unexpected breakouts in people who don't normally experience significant acne can occur because a disrupted barrier and altered acid mantle create conditions where certain bacteria proliferate more easily. Flaking or peeling that continues beyond the initial adjustment period associated with starting a new active ingredient is another indicator that exfoliation frequency may be exceeding what the skin can recover from between sessions. What helps a compromised skin barrier recover is almost the exact opposite of what caused the damage in the first place. The most consistently recommended approach by dermatologists is to simplify the skincare routine, significantly removing the majority of active ingredients and exfoliants temporarily, and focus instead on gentle cleansing and ingredients that support barrier repair. Ceramides, which are one of the key lipid components of the barrier, are frequently recommended because they directly replenish one of the structural elements that overexfoliation depletes. Humectants like hyaluronic acid help draw water into the skin, supporting hydration while the barrier recovers its ability to retain moisture naturally. Occlusives, which sit on the surface of the skin and reduce water evaporation, provide a temporary external substitute for some of the barrier's protective function while the underlying structure repairs itself. The timeline for barrier recovery varies depending on how long and how severely it was compromised, but many dermatologists suggest that meaningful recovery typically takes several weeks of consistent barrier supportive care combined with a significant reduction or temporary elimination of exfoliation. Knowing how often to exfoliate to avoid this problem in the first place is genuinely individual and depends on several factors, including skin type, the specific exfoliant being used, and what other active ingredients are already present in the routine. However, general dermatological guidance suggests that for most people, exfoliating 2 to 3 times per week represents a reasonable upper limit for chemical exfoliants at typical at-home concentrations, while physical exfoliation is often recommended even less frequently. People with sensitive skin, a history of skin conditions like eczema or rosacea, or skin that is already showing signs of reactivity are often better served by exfoliating once a week or even less frequently, and paying careful attention to how the skin responds after each session rather than following a fixed schedule regardless of how the skin is behaving. One of the most useful practical adjustments people can make is to treat exfoliation frequency as responsive rather than fixed. Instead of committing to exfoliating every other day because a skincare guide recommended it, paying attention to how the skin looks and feels in the days following each exfoliation session provides much more relevant information about whether the chosen frequency is appropriate for that specific skin. If skin feels comfortable, looks balanced, and shows no signs of increased sensitivity or unusual reactivity in the days following exfoliation, the frequency may be appropriate. If skin feels tight, looks irritated, or seems more reactive than usual in the days following exfoliation, that's a reliable signal that the frequency needs to be reduced, regardless of what any general guideline suggests. The broader lesson that overexfoliation illustrates about skincare in general is that more is rarely better when it comes to active skincare interventions. The instinct to add more products, use them more frequently, or increase the concentration of active ingredients in pursuit of faster or more dramatic results frequently backfires. Particularly when it comes to anything that affects the skin barrier directly. The skin has its own regulatory mechanisms and repair processes that work on their own timeline, and the most effective skincare approaches tend to be those that support these natural processes rather than pushing against them by demanding faster results than the skin can biologically deliver. Exfoliation, done correctly and at an appropriate frequency for a given individual's skin type and routine, remains a genuinely useful tool in a skincare routine. The goal isn't to stop exfoliating entirely, but to understand that the relationship between exfoliation and skin health follows a curve rather than a straight line increasing. From not enough to the right amount produces real benefits, but continuing to increase past that point produces diminishing returns that eventually become negative returns as the skin barrier suffers more damage than it can recover from between sessions. Finding where that optimal point is for your specific skin is a process of observation and adjustment rather than following a universal rule, and it requires paying attention to what the skin itself is communicating rather than simply following whatever exfoliation frequency is currently being recommended in popular skincare content. Understanding this helps reframe what glowing, healthy skin actually requires. It doesn't require aggressive, frequent removal of the outer layer of skin in pursuit of the newest cells underneath. It requires maintaining the integrity of the barrier that protects all the layers of skin beneath it, supporting the natural cell turnover. Process at a pace the skin can sustain, and recognizing that the skin's own biology is generally working toward health rather than against it, as long as it's given the conditions it needs to function properly rather than being repeatedly disrupted by well-intentioned but excessive intervention.